Hello and welcome back. Hoping you're having great days, good vacation, enjoying your time with your families. As you already know, your first assignment is there on the Moodle. I hope you're enjoying doing that because it's more than an assignment. It's only a surveying to whatever we did together. All what you need is to review the lessons and you will be able to answer it in a very nice, smoothie way. As you know, this is only an introduction to political science, even the assignments will be more easy, simple, smooth. I don't want things to be more complicated. I just want to make sure that you are reading and following up whatever we are doing together, and you're capable to understand the theme of this course and the idea behind these lessons and why it was organized in this session. Let's start our new course or our new, lesson together. Today, our 12th lesson. We are going to complete the Marx approach, or we're going to start with the second part of Marxian approach. If you do remember, in the last lesson, we talked about a lot of elements about Marx, how he started the theory, core elements, the core features of this theory, how he transformed the concept of community into elements of economic, social, and political structure, etc., etc. And we ended the last session saying that we are going to talk about the criticism of this approach. So, we're going to start immediately talking about certain criticisms of this Marxian approach. First of all, Karl Marx is undoubtedly one of the most influential philosophers of modern times. His ideas, concepts, participation, and doctrines had acquired the status of a powerful ideology and program of action. Actually, we could never ever talk about the progress of political science without talking about Marx. We could never ever talk about the progress of social science without talking about Marx, because he changed the perspective of dealing and treating with community in general. His ideas on certain materialism, historical materialism, and economic sector changed the entire track of dealing with community, society, and political science. And in spite of all of this, uh, no one can deny that all that effort, all his concepts, ideas, participation, the idea of dialectical materialism, values, class struggle, etc., 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 have been extensively discussed, debated, modified, and sometimes even rejected completely, had been criticized not only in the implementation but even in the level of theoretical acceptance. Uh, let's talk about more how this was subjected in certain way. Marxism had been subjected to severe criticisms from various corners, actually. Along with Plato, Hegel, Marx was seen as an enemy of the open theory. Marxism claimed to have studied the laws of history on the basis of which it advocated total sweeping and radical changes. Not only was it impossible to have first-hand knowledge based on some set of laws that govern society and human individuals, but Karl Popper also rejected Marx's social engineering as dangerous, for it treated individuals as certain uh, subordinate or at a certain subservient to the interests of the whole. Popper also rejected the historical and holism of utopian social engineering of Marxism. In contrast, he advocated piecemeal social engineering, where change would be gradual, modest, allowing lapses and errors, for it was not possible to convince of everything. Popper claimed that Marx's scientific socialism was wrong not only about society, but also about science. He claimed that the capitalism that Marx described never existed. He wrote the Marx muzzled course of intelligent people by saying that the historic method is the scientific way of approaching social problems. Further, Marx made the economy all important, ignoring factors like nationality, friendship, religious, sex, etc. Society was far more complex than what Marx described. Popper has rightly mentioned Marx brought into the social science and historical science the very important idea that economic conditions are of great importance in the life of society. There was nothing like serious economic history before Marx. Actually, in following discussing what Marx said and how people criticized him, we should spotlight on one certain point, that Marx actually didn't foresee the rise of fascism, wolf state, totalitarianism, but other approaches. His analysis of capitalism was at best applicable to early 19th century capitalism, though his criticisms of capitalism as being wasteful, unequal, was true. However, his alternative to genuine democracy and communism seemed more official to realize and practice, for they didn't accommodate a world which was becoming increasingly differentiated and different functionally and in certain specific way. Popper's critique of Marxism on the basis of certain concept relevant to the theoretical background, especially of falsification, was equally true and difficult to refuse. For Marxism constantly adjusted theory in light of reality. Marx's vision of a new social order in which there will be neither alienation nor exploitation, no classes classification, no state, is highly fascinating. And because of this attraction proof, certain thinkers said that Marxism is a utopia, but a generous the human one. Uh, Another point in criticizing Marx, we can see another thinker called Harrington. He portrayed the contemporary radical view of Marx as being an excellent critic of capitalism, but unable to provide a detailed alternative to it. A democratic state or system was totally alien to his explanation, in spite of his playoff for democratization of social forces. Marx dismissed liberty as a purely system or core ideal, and was openly a little bit scornful of democracy as an invention designed to deceive the people. Uh, as part of this criticism as well, actually, Marx failed in a way to analyze human nature correctly. Nevertheless, it cannot be denied that the true and the false together in him constitute one of the most important compelling forces that modern history has seen. The collapse of communism proved that serious shortcoming of Marxism, both in theory and practice. It is best, in the best cases, remained a critic rather than providing a serious alternative to liberal democracy. And in spite of Marx's utopia being truly generous, it displayed a potential for being a little bit despotic and contributing more than offering solutions. Centralization of power and absence of checks and balances on absolute power were themselves a little bit unacceptable and unapplicable, and not matching for human freedom and liberation. Um, Another point in criticizing Marx, we should say that Marxist approach claims to be scientific and progressive. It also assumes a normative character, but the weakness in this approach lies in conforming to an ideology with utmost rigidity. It has been criticized for the line that pseudo-scientific of generated Marxism. Marx placed too much emphasis given to economic factor in explaining social and political cultural order change in all aspects of community seemed to be explained solely as derived from the economic substructure. However, it has a degree of autonomy. For example, it is difficult to explain certain aspects, phenomena of liberation in terms of productive or economic relations. In other words, we can say in a simple way, economic is not enough to explain everything is going on inside the community, while Marx thought that to use economic analysis will be very enough to explain everything inside the community and to explain the progress of the community as well. Marx's theory of history, in a way, was the opposite of the fact that industrialized countries haven't moved closer to revolution. But on contrary, the recent revolutions have been in peasant societies, such as China, Russia, for example. And that is one critical point that Marx failed to explain. Capitalist societies seem to have become more secure from threat of revolution throughout 19th century, and this is exactly what Marx didn't expect. In other words, no socialist revolution of 20th century had occurred according to the Marxist model. All successful revolutions have occurred in relatively backward, non-industrialized nations, and that is totally the opposite of what Marx assumed. Uh, in another level of this criticism, anarchists also criticized Marx. According to them, or during their criticism, they assumed that Marx failed to grasp the unacceptable dangers and the readiness to take an authoritarian centralized approach. Marxist is willing to use the authoritarian state to run society after the revolutions and to be ruthless in this. This is extremely dangerous. Those in control cannot be trusted and are very likely to become dictators more than people who people can trust, or actors who can really take care of the entire community. So, in this point, the system that Marx assumed will end up in a dictator state. Marx placed an emphasis, a very precise emphasis on the progress of history through classification or antagonism, and he put no concern on moral or political values in classifying these classes or in building class interest, which is totally incorrect and dangerous. Interests or idea of having certain identity for each class was a little bit ambiguous in Marx's theory. Interests or ideas were not conforming to his logic of materialism, became matters of false and consciousness later on. The Marxist approach is based on logical view of economic determinism, but it ignores totally non-economic and cultural movements in the development of history, which is, as we said before, one of the most important criticism that Marx faced. And the other side, Orthodox Marxism also ignored the forces of nationalism and national polity as the dominant factor in modern politics. Marxism not only reduces politics to the dependent states of certain economic structure, but also by ignoring religion, culture, ethnicity, language, and above all nationalism, it failed to provide an understanding of political developments, whether in the first, second, and third world. And this is exactly the core reason why the Marxism was unapplicable anymore, because as we said before, any political methodology or theory, if it's not capable to produce knowledge or to offer certain alternative solutions, it would be unacceptable anymore. Okay, whatever may the shortcomings and limitations of Marxism, it is beyond dispute that Marx would be remembered as a critic of 19th century capitalism and politics. He was the first socialist, as we said, who stressed the importance and increasing role of proletariat, or the class of workers, as he liked to name it. Marx was the first political thinker to offer a systematic exposition to scientific socialism and communism. He made a unique contribution to political system. We don't want to be very rough and rigid and refuse all the importance of his participation and contribution. But as usually, we are trying to be very objective and discussing each theory we are talking about. He did a great job, he offered great participation, he offered great analysis, but as other theories, he had or he has serious criticism or serious weaknesses that end up in what we discussed second day. All thinkers depend on his theories and concepts to explain what theories they are trying to build. Okay, I think we have a nice puzzle. Okay, our puzzle for today is, definitely we know what is a prime minister, right? And definitely you heard the word civic leader. Um, the puzzle for today, I want you to pick one prime minister and compare it to one civic leader from your point of view. Like, I want to know how you classify roles and titles. So please pick one prime minister, whether it's alive, he's dead, she's alive, etc., and compare it with a civic leader. My only condition for this puzzle, I want the two characters to be in a close, like I want you, for example, if you decide to take these characters from the 20th century, so both of them will be in the same year or in the same track. Um, Try to have a nice timing for the characters, and try to have a chronological system to select your characters. Now, let's talk about another thinker who called Max Weber. Max Weber is probably the best known and most influential figure in sociology and the social theories. Weber worked very hard to produce certain theory, which is so varied and subject to so many interpretations that had influenced a wide area of sociology. He entered the field of sociology through law and remained as one among the great sociologists of the 20th century. Weber, in his life, earned varied experiences as a soldier, professor, and politician, also as a legal expert. Also, he is a historian, as an economist, also a thinker who studied sociology, politics, and human science. And based on this very various, rich background, his contributions and work covers a very wide sector of philosophy, economics, comparative history, religious, law, bureaucracy, etc., etc. One of his most important contributions, what he called ideal type. According to Max Weber, the term ideal type has a distinctive meaning, and there are certain underlying principles portraying this term and this concept, and participating in building the construction of this type, according to him. Weber used ideal type in a specific sense. To him, this term or this concept is a mental construction. It's like a model for the sustainable and systematic structured characterizations of concrete situation. Indeed, he used this term or this concept as a methodological tool to understand and analyze social construction, reality, and elements. Actually, methodology is the conceptual and logical research procedure by which knowledge is developed. Historically, much of the methodological concerns are in the social sciences, had been directed towards establishing their scientific credentials. Marx Weber was particularly concerned with the problem of objectivity in social sciences. Hence, he used ideal type as a methodological tool that looks at reality in an objective way. He classifies and systemized also and defines social reality without subjective bias. The ideal has nothing to do with values. Its function as a research tool is for classification and comparison. In other words, ideal types, according to him, are concepts formulated on the basis of facts collected carefully and precisely and in a very analytical method for empirical research in this sense. Ideal types are constructed or certain concepts or constructs which are used as methodological devices or tools in our understanding and analysis for certain problems and phenomena. So he was trying to offer certain stereotype, if you want to call it, or certain image, mental image, which we should use to compare and analyze issues. Weber used ideal types in three distinctive ways, actually. Indeed, his three kinds of ideal types are very distinguished by three levels of abstraction. The first kind of ideal types were rooted to the historical particularization and compared with Western theory, the Protestant ethic, etc. In reality, this kind of ideal type referred to the phenomena that appeared only in the specific historical periods and in particular cultural areas. The second kind of his ideal type was relevant to the abstract elements of social reality, for example, the concepts of bureaucracy and feudalism. These elements of social reality were found in a variety of historical and cultural contexts. The third kind of ideal type was relevant to the reconstruction of a particular kind of behaviors. Okay, uh, we need to talk about certain elements in Max Weber ideal type to understand the structure of this methodological tool. And here we need to talk about what he called social action. Weber's idea of sociology was based on his conception of social action. The aim of social science is to arrive at a rational understanding of human actions. According to him, sociology is a science which attempts the interpretive understanding of social action in order to arrive at a causal explanation of its cause and effects. It's like building a relation between cause and effects to explain these phenomena. Weber had talked about four types of social actions. These are rational actions with reference to goals, rational actions with reference to values, traditional actions, effective actions. These are classified according to their modes of orientation. Rational actions with reference to goals are classified in terms of their conditions or means for the successful attainment of the actor's own rationality choose ends. Rational actions with are classified in terms of rational orientation to an absolute value. That is action which is directed to overriding ideals of virtue, honor, or division to cause. Traditional action types are classified as one which is under the influence of long practice, costumes, and habits. Effective action is or are classified in terms of a certain affective orientation, especially emotional, determined by the specific state of feeling of the actor himself or herself. Another important term in the ideal type methodology of Max Weber is rationalism or rationalization. Rationalization as an ideal type and as a historical force appears in much of Weber's writing. He regards the development of rational forms to be one of the most important characteristics of the development of Western theory and capitalism. He also viewed traditional and charismatic forms as irrational or at least non-rational. The latter may rely on religion, magic, or supernatural as a way of explaining the social world, and authority may also derive from these. These may have no systematic form of development, but may rely on personal insight, revelation, emotion, feelings, features, etc., that are non-rational in form. Back to talk about the structure of rationality according to Weber. He produced certain types of rationality. In his writings, Weber used rationality in various ways, actually. He produced four meanings of structures of rationality. We're going to talk about them in a very precise and short way. Number one, or the first type, is practical rationality. In this type, he involved the individual who considered ends and know some systematic pace decide what is the best means or course of action to pursue in order to achieve these ends. This form of rationality can consider to be pragmatic and that it provides individuals with a way of pursuing practical ends. The second type is the theoretical rationality, and this is an abstract concept formed as essential part of logical reasoning or theoretical models. These attempts to describe, explain, or understand the world in terms of models that are constructed from observation and reasoning. These forms of rationality need not be associated with social action, but are more a part of logical structures and theories. In completing types of rationality that Max Weber taught in his theory, we reach the third type, substantive rationality. In this, Weber assumed that individuals might consider a range of possible values or actions and attempting to make them consistent. Weber termed the substantive rationality and considered that very problematic in modern society, and that rationalization of social life makes it so difficult for people or citizens to pursue particular values. For example, pursuit of family or religious values may be very difficult in modern society given economic pressures and dominance of bureaucratic organization. The fourth type, called formal rationality, which is a broader form of rationality that characterized organizations, especially bureaucratic ones. This leads to universally applied rules, laws, regulations, norms that characterize formal rationality in the Western, particularly in the economic, legal, and scientific institutions, as well as in the bureaucratic forms of domination. Rational legal forms or authority, such as the contemporary legal and judicial systems, are examples of this formal nationality or rationality. Sorry. Okay, after finishing talking about Weber, let's have a comparison, or comparative look between Marx and Max Weber. In many respects, the writings of Karl Marx are a logical outgrowth of the period in which he lived. The course of European thought during his lifetime was subject to a variety of currents, and it was from this diversity that Marx was able to build his own system. What he approved of in the works of his participation, he incorporated. What he disapproved of, he rejected. From German philosophy, he adopted the dialectic, but he refused the metaphysical formulations in which Hegel, for example, had first cast it. From French methodologies, or from France, Marx first learned about socialism, but after doing so, he destroyed its previous components for their utopian and certain mentalities. From the English political economists, Marx gleaned a composite picture of these abuses inherent in the capitalist mode of accumulation and production. Then he rejected any notion that mere reforms might certain abuses in the community. But Marx passed beyond simply abstracting facts from others. He brought a new insight to bear on the pressing questions of his age. A fundamental difference between the orientations of Marx and Weber that helps reveal the nature of their thoughts is that Marx concerned himself with discovering the patterns of uniformities that underlie every period of history, while Weber, for his part, viewed European capitalism as a certain culmination of European history considered as a single civilization. In the sense, every period of European history is important for its uniqueness, which in turn provides insight into the uniqueness of capitalist civilization as well, rather than for its regularity, which causes difficulty when trying to explain the difference of other civilizations, as Chinese, for example. Both systems of historical conceptualization, however, had gained utility in the comparative study of government and politics. Okay, thank you so much for sharing me this. I totally understand. It's not interesting to talk about science, history, and methodology, but I hope you really find it benefit. Thank you so much for sharing me this. Always be safe and remember things are exactly how you want to see it, not how it is. Thank you so much. Be safe.